Welcome to Moonshot Radio, where we stop and take a moment to reflect on the rapid pace of technological change. We meet the people reprogramming our future to explore what's coming, how it's reshaping our world, and what that means for our human experience. I'm Linda Du, a fintech founder, investor, and adventurer, posing the question of what it means to be human and exist in society in the age of technology. Our guest today is Ben Haldeman, founder of LifeShip, a project to spread life to the universe, with the first projects including monuments with backups of Earth to the moon. Ben has already landed a pyramid capsule on the moon, including a seed bank, human DNA, and a cultural archive including stories of the Earth and humanity. In this conversation, we discuss what it might mean to preserve, restore, and regenerate life, how we are on the cusp of rapid advancements in space exploration, and the human values we carry with us in a multiplanetary future. To get started, could you tell me what LifeShip does in your own words?
Great to be here, Linda. I'm excited. So LifeShip is a mission about stewarding life in the universe and continuing life. And our first set of missions are monuments across space with a backup of Earth, a backup of Earth's life, and then the story of humanity in it. And last year, March of 2025, we landed a small pyramid on the moon on board a commercial lander. And it's about 30 millimeters tall. It's a small golden pyramid, and it has plant seeds of all different species of plants around Earth. It has DNA of all different species, DNA of humans, and then an art and knowledge and cultural archive of humanity. So it's a collective time capsule and archive of Earth that all sorts of people participate in. The vision is doing bigger and bigger monuments across space and on the moon and on Mars and on asteroids, helping steward the expansion of life outwards and one day carrying life to the stars.
And could you tell me about the planning process for that first project? So how long did it take you to plan? How did you decide on what artifacts would represent humanity? How did you build the operations about it? Because you mentioned the DNA, and so there was a lot of crowdsourcing of that. How did you manage all those parallel tracks?
So I started LifeShip about 6 years ago, and this was our fifth space mission. So we've done several we've built up to. The first couple went to the International Space Station. And so I started with a vision of plant seeds and DNA, and then we made a consumer kit for people to add their DNA. And that helped us bring in a community and supporters that helped fund the initial missions by people also joining and having their DNA part of this archive of Earth and humanity. And so I started with those missions, the International Space Station missions, and two of them went up and they orbited Earth thousands of times, and we put thousands of people's DNA up on the space station. And then I also worked towards getting on moon missions, and we're at this very exciting time for the moon where over 50 years ago, people went to the moon. And since then, there's been some robotic missions. Just in the next few years, humans will go back to the moon. But right now also, there's several different commercial moon landing companies that are building robotic moon landers that'll go land on the moon. And several have landed on the moon now. A few have crashed into the moon. A few have tried to make it to the moon and didn't make it to the moon. So it's still very early on as far as getting regular, reliable delivery to the moon, but we're right at the right time where it's still challenging and exciting. And so I come from a space background, and I started by getting payload space and developing the relationships to get these on different moon landers. And we were on one that didn't make it to the moon, and then this next one perfectly landed on the moon that landed last year.
And I'd love to hear about your background as well and how you came to starting LifeShip.
I studied mechanical engineering, and I went to Berkeley at grad school, and my first exposure to space really was I worked on instruments to look for amino acids on Mars. And so these were the instrument that powered a microfluidic chip that would pump liquid through and then do this electrophoresis to identify amino acids and which ones they are. And that I did in grad school. And since then, the most recent Mars rover mission had an instrument of a similar concept that found amino acids on the moon and found signs of them. And so that got me curious about looking for life out there and where else life could be. And then I joined an organization called Las Cumbres Observatory. I was one of the first people to join in Santa Barbara. It was a foundation set up to build optical telescopes around the world to find new planets and find other astronomical phenomena that are changing over time. And so I did that for 8 years and built big telescopes around the world. And that really got me more curious about where else life could be, where else are habitable planets, and the nature of the universe. And so I got to design telescopes and set them up on mountaintops around the world. And then I was looking for my next thing and had this sense of wanting to go to San Francisco in the Bay Area and change the world. And then out of the blue, an old roommate reached out to me and said he had found a cool stealth space company and that he thought I'd be a good introduction and maybe it's a place that would make sense for me to come work. The company is called Planet Labs, and I joined pretty early on. And Planet built small satellites to image the whole Earth every day. And so I ended up joining Planet and designed the whole camera system and then architected a big part of the satellite to build hundreds of satellites to image the whole world and care for our changing planet. And so those were the first projects I worked on that actually went to space. And it was right at a kind of pioneering time for the new space movement where we launched the most satellites ever built of a single type of constellation. And this was before SpaceX had built the Starlink satellites. And it's still, Planet satellites are still the biggest Earth observation satellite network ever created. And so I designed a core part of that with the camera, and then also went on to new mission design and coordinating with the rockets to get these to space, and really got to be part of a cool new space company that grew fast and did lots of things in space.
And so I guess there's something almost unique in the way that you work as well, because space and deep tech, they're often very big companies with a lot of capital investment, and you are mostly working on your own, but also doing a lot of crowdfunding. What inspired you to take this more individual path? Why did you do something different from what most space companies do?
Yeah, so I had the vision for LifeShip of like a community-powered mission to spread life in the universe, and that was about how we do space and the culture of space. And that vision can scale infinitely. It could be taking us to the stars. It could be humans living in space. And yet I think about MVPs and like the initial minimum viable product and ways to make an impact with an initial demonstration mission. I came up with small monuments as the first steps, and those could get people to be part of and a community to be part of and crowdfund it, and then also get different entrepreneurs to add their own collections in, and that could help fund it. And then also I've gotten brands to be part of it, and that's helped fund them. And it seemed to be a mission that could be done in like a bootstrapped, community-driven, crowd-funded way. And so far I've stuck with that. And yet there's much bigger things I dream of and want to do. And so we're taking it step by step as far as what makes sense for each mission. And for now, the missions are at the appropriate size and scale that I can do it this way. And I can do it with a crowdfunded and bring organizations and partners in to help create it. But yeah, I dream of a 1,000-year mission to populate space and carry life outwards and to do space in a beautiful way for humanity. And so I'm open to the evolution of this mission and what makes sense as a funding model for it.
I was mentioning that I do a lot of stuff in the polar regions, and there's a lot of, because it's a non-life sustaining environment, there's just a lot of things to think about, like should we even be there. And so I'd be interested to get your thoughts on, if space is a non-life sustaining environment, what are things that you're thinking about to sustain life? If your longer term vision is to send life out there, how do we actually sustain life? Or is it going to be something more like we send out fragments of human life that then become resurrected or revived?
It's an interesting time. There's multiple organizations building the next generation of rockets that will carry people out there. And there's a big, from nation states to organizations to billionaires to crowdfunded things, there's a big push towards people on the moon, and then cities on the moon, and then cities on Mars. And so we live at a time that is very exciting towards people living in space and life being sustained in space. Space is hard, and it's a hard place to live, but there's no limiting blockers there. And so we live at such a exciting, rapid, exponential time. And as these next rockets become available that are fully reusable, then it is like when airplanes opened up intercontinental travel and when the railroads opened up the West in California. It's all of a sudden the frontier will be open, and there is a whole lot of companies and entrepreneurs building all the different parts of the system needed for people to live in space. And so I see what I'm working on as there's multiple paths that can and will take. And one is like, first, let's save archives of life, and let's save the DNA and the seeds. And because humans have built seed banks for thousands of years, we know the value of saving life for future generations. A first part of our mission is let's back up life. So we've already saved one of those on the moon, but we want to save archives and backups of life across the solar system and beyond. That's a piece of the mission. And if you could imagine, if we found some relic from an alien civilization, if it had the DNA of the aliens and the whole alien world, that would be like one of the greatest finds ever achieved. And we may or may not have the technology today to bring back those species, but it's quite possible that future civilization could bring back those species, or at least learn from that. And so, yeah, and we are at a time where we lose many species, and it makes sense to save a copy of all the species somewhere else. And so the moon is our closest neighbor, and you always want to save an archive of something valuable somewhere else. And so the moon is the next logical place to save a copy of Earth. And so that's our first mission. But this mission then, as people are going out towards space or out and living in space, I dream of our community being out there, and our community living in a biosphere on the moon someday, and having plants surrounding them. And so like a mission that is done in stewardship of life as well. And then long term, you can imagine sending seeds out there that are meant to actually grow, or people going out on a interstellar starship with a DNA bank of life, or embryos of all different species. And so, yeah, the long-term mission starts to look like a Noah's Ark mission to carry life outwards and to seed new worlds, and that it all starts with seed banks and backups of life. And those seed banks aren't meant to sprout someday and create life, but longer term, maybe we create something like that. And so it is a vision that encompasses all of this, but overall, a movement meant to steward life.
And something that I was a little sad thinking about when I was reading about LifeShip is, when you take a backup of something, it's usually in case of a disaster. And I guess in this case, the disaster would be the end of either human civilization or the end of life on Earth. And I remember as well in some of the early days of SpaceX, and when there were still all these conversations about going to Mars, some of the critics were saying things like, it's a cop-out of accountability and responsibility of Earth, because if we know how to move to Mars or know how to move to other different planets or asteroids, then is that an excuse for mistreating the planet? So I'd love to hear your thoughts about stewardship and conservation of this planet and the life systems now.
Yeah, I think of it as an optimistic mission. Like, what if humanity is the species that goes on to ripple life across the galaxy, and new worlds get started because of what happened here on Earth, and we carry this miraculous life outwards. And so, yeah, long term, it is a vision towards humanity being great stewards of life. And if we're doing that and can do that, then I hope we can do that here too as well. And I love Earth. I go to the rainforest a lot. I climb the mountains. I dive in the ocean, and I love the beauty of Earth and the life on Earth, and that's why I'm doing this. And I feel like if you love it, you protect it, and saving copies of it is a way of protecting of it. So it is a mission about honoring and cherishing Earth, and I believe part of humanity's role is to be stewards of life, and that means stewarding life here. And I believe the Earth is conscious and intelligent, and that there is a consciousness to life, and that life wants to spread, and that's what life does, and that humans are like cells of the Earth, and the Earth is an organism. And part of our role here, and part of what the Earth grew us to do, is to help the Earth reproduce and help continue life. And so I feel that is part of our mission and our purpose here as humans, is to continue life in the universe. And I don't see it as like an either or. I see what happens as in space can come back to help Earth. And that's been a lot of my work and career, is to use space to help Earth as well. And so I feel humans moving into space can both be a model for space as a blank slate, and how we live out there can then be a model to help us live better here. And then there's an abundance of energy and materials and resources in space that eventually will come back to helping Earth. So I believe space is a tremendous resource to help Earth. And so we should utilize it. We should be moving outwards, and we should be doing it in a way to help our home planet as well.
How do you see governance? I know there's a bunch of different treaties for nation states, and I think there's always advantages of cooperation, but there's also limitations. And then we also saw in modern human history, there's been a history of war and colonialism. And so I think while as a civilization we are good at things, a lot of things, there's also a lot of shortcomings that have been persistent time and time again. So what does it look like to set values, missions, and governance for going into space?
The space is a blank slate, and we get to, it will be interesting how it gets developed. And there's also an opportunity there to do it in a beautiful way. And we have nation states racing to build bases in space, and we have all sorts of movements that want to put humans out there and want to build things in space. And it's an opportunity to see how that evolves and to be out there. And yeah, I hope humans can do it in a beautiful way, and I hope we can learn from out there. And space has also traditionally been an area of like cooperation, between global cooperation, or between nation states that didn't otherwise cooperate. And so it is a bit of the Wild West, and there is a bit of, however it starts to happen, can impact the future of our species, both in space as well as on Earth. And then I feel that's also why this is important right now. Is, yeah, there can be arguments like, why don't we wait until we figure out all of Earth? I feel space is part of figuring out Earth, and however this happens over the next several decades will impact the entire future of our species, both on Earth as well as like if and when we become a galactic species. Like how the seed is planted over the next several years could impact the entire future of the galaxy and beyond. Now is an important, critical time to be doing it in the best way and to try to have an impact in that way. I'm excited about space being done in an inspirational, beautiful way in service to life. And there's many humans out there that are intrigued by space and interested in space and inspired by space. And many people dream of going to space. And yeah, now is the time for movements that are about community and about humanity and about making it accessible to all sorts of people and doing it in a beautiful way.
I'd love to hear about how your how the scientific process looked as well as the design and development process, because I work a lot in software. Software is very forgiving. Putting something that is going out into space and being preserved there is much less forgiving. And so you mentioned you've been working on this for 6 years and most recently put a pyramid onto the moon. How do you prototype stuff that goes into space? How do you test stuff? And then how did you also settle on doing a pyramid? Were there other ideas that popped up?
Yeah. So I was part of Planet Labs early on, and we really took a new approach to satellites and built them more like fast iteration and getting prototypes in space and then getting the next version in space and learning as we go and making them better and better. When I had the vision for a seed bank and a DNA bank on the moon, I could have gone to like, what is the best scientific solution? And it must be perfectly 12 inches of lead radiation blocking material in front of it. And it must be cryogenically held to this millidegrees, and it must be perfectly done. And I must have this number of every species. But I decided to go with a first viable product. Like, okay, let's get 100 different seeds up there. They may not last 1,000 years. And let's get a collection of DNA of all different species and people. And yeah, that might last thousands or tens of thousands of years. We're not sure on the DNA. But then I also etched the entire human genome into a ceramic that will last 1 billion years. Etched a whole collection of humanity's story and Earth's story and art and people's wishes and stories and photos into these nickel nano layers that you can zoom in on a microscope and see them. And those will last 1 billion years. So yeah, there is some part of these monuments, including the entire human genome, that will last 1 billion years inside them. And so, yeah, I was able to figure out what could be done in a small format and how to do it quickly and how to do it affordably and how to get it funded, and really took that approach rather than the pure scientific, what is the most gold standard scientific way of doing it. I also see towards building towards that and towards iterating and building more comprehensive backups of Earth and ones that will last longer. And so I took that approach. As far as what got me to a pyramid, the first couple we put up on the space station were small coin-sized discs that had the DNA of people in all different species inside them. And so I started with more like a coin size. But ever since the beginning, a pyramid had been recurring as something that made sense. Humans have built pyramids around Earth for thousands of years. Then they popped up in all different disconnected civilizations, and each one came towards a pyramid as a symbol, and they've become a symbol of something a great civilization passes on to a future civilization. And that has some mystery to it, holds some secrets and some knowledge of that civilization to a future civilization. It's a beautiful, simple form, whereas I could have gotten an artist to design some sort of elaborate other structure. A pyramid came as a simple cosmic form that our ancestors have used, that we still have mysteries around, and we still feel like there's some greater cosmic thing going on with the symbol of pyramids. I recently went to Egypt for the first time and visited the Great Pyramid and feel that there's something energetically going on with the symbol. And so it felt like the right appropriate symbol that has this cosmic connection that keeps humanity in a curiosity around why did we build pyramids and what is our fascination with them. And yeah, it feels like, oh, now there's a pyramid on the moon, and that is different than there's a statue on the moon or there's a time capsule on the moon, and a pyramid has a meaning to it.
It feels like legacy is a really strong theme in your work, and specifically because with the seed bank and the DNA, people can't really change it when it comes to the artwork, because that's almost the story that someone leaves or the story that someone gives. And so I feel like there's some connection between the legacy that people want to leave as well as like the type of artwork that an artist might create to go to the moon. So I wonder if you have any stories about the art that people are making, how people think about what to put there, given the space constraints, as well as what you've learned about the way that people think about legacy?
Mm-hmm. To take legacy to the big picture, I hope, and I feel inspiration towards humanity leaving a legacy beyond this earth. And the earth will not be here forever. It could be here another billion years or so and sustain life. But I hope that the story of humanity lives on across the galaxy, and that we go on to being a galactic species, and that we go on to create all sorts of new worlds out there. And so I hope humanity leaves a legacy beyond. And then through these missions, I also see it as a way for all sorts of people to leave their story or their creativity or their creation behind, and as part of that. And so we've done a few different like art galleries on the moon where artists can add their art, and we've added people's books and their song and voices. We've created ways for people to add wishes and prayers, and then we have all sorts of partners that have created their own collections, whether that's like other art galleries that other entrepreneurs and partners have created and curated. We nano engrave those into technologies and send them to the moon, or artists have created their different stories and books and different creations. And so we've really become a platform for that, a platform for individuals to add something to, as well as a platform for an artist or creator or an entrepreneur to put together a bigger collection of something and include that in these monuments.
When it comes to life and going out there, so if we assume that other extraterrestrial life forms are doing the same, how do you think about I don't know if it's interspecies or inter-human-alien relationship dynamics?
That's a big question. I feel like we will make contact in the coming decades with what there are programs like SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, that has built radio dishes around the planet and has looked for signals out there. And they're processing a huge amount of data and looking at a huge amount of the sky, and yet they will admit that they're only seeing a fraction of what we can look for so far, and that we will be able to cover a much bigger dimension of looking for intelligence out there. And in the coming years and decades, it is quite possible we find conclusive signs of life out there, and whether we find a way to make real-time communication that's an interesting question, and I don't know. One way would be as if we received a message, but it would take us 1,000 years to send a message back. And so that wouldn't be two-way communication. That would be just like us one way receiving something. But I do feel that there's perhaps reality and consciousness and is not exactly as it seems in this three-dimensional world. And perhaps there's other channels that we can open up in towards communicating or making connection. I feel there are signs like things like telepathy is like another way that humans are able to relate with others. And there may be ways of communicating across time and space that are not directly radio waves or sending light pulses. I feel that we are on such an expanding time of our ability to understand and communicate with AI and new technologies that we are opening up the possibilities of how we could make contact.
You've spoken a lot about consciousness, and so I'm interested to see how you think about what makes us uniquely human, if anything. I think 3 or 4 years ago, I might have said consciousness and intelligence as some sub-factor of that, but in the past couple of years, intelligence has become so abundant that it's almost commoditized. And already people are thinking about, does intelligence matter that much anymore? And so I'd love to understand from you if you think of consciousness and intelligence as different things, and whether there is anything that makes us uniquely human.
I guess I personally come from more of a scientific engineering feeling like everything is understandable and provable in the science world and is kind of as it seems. And then maybe 10 years ago, I really went down more of a path of yoga and meditation and personal growth and human potential. And yeah, I feel like there's a lot more to the universe and reality and consciousness than appears in the simple 3D world. I think that is like part of what makes humans human, is going down that path of emotions and connection and heart and tuning our own vessels to understand the universe and experience the full range of being human. And so, yeah, we live in this time of explosion in intelligence and our compute tools enabling us to do more and learn more, and us to have an explosion of robots coming soon. But I think that this all can be done in a way that also enables humans to do what humans do best. And I also feel we are at this time of humans living longer and humans awakening. And now we have access to more and more knowledge and more tools and techniques to expand our own minds and our own abilities. Yeah, at the same time that we have infinite distractions, we also have infinite tools to learn and awaken and really pursue our own greatest human potential in ways that weren't available previously.
I'd love to hear about how the space industry itself has developed, because as you mentioned, I think it's only been 50, 60 years that I've been able to go into space. And especially it feels like the past 10 years with SpaceX, with all of these other things that have been going on. So what happened that made the space industry accelerate so fast in the past few years? And then also, what does that unlock? So what are some visions that are now possible because of some of these innovations like lower cost to launch?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, space for a long time. We did trips to the moon 55 years ago, and those were a huge national project where a large percentage of the GDP of the US was racing to get humans on the moon. And NASA became this amazing scientific and technological collection of people that were able to design the spaceships and land them on the moon and send people to the moon before we have modern computers. That was a huge endeavor. They learned how to do it safely. And then over time, there's no longer the big race to the moon. So we kind of stepped back from that being a big focus to keep sending people back. And then a lot of what happened in space was more satellites and building the International Space Station. And there came along defense contractors and government contractors that built the space station and built a lot of the satellites and provided those as a service to the government or built the technologies for the government. NASA continued to do exquisite scientific missions and land a rover on Mars and fly a helicopter on Mars and do beautiful missions that have advanced our understanding of the universe. And those were done in ways that it was hard for NASA to take big risks because they wanted to do them right, knew how to do these missions in a certain style. Everything seems to get more expensive, and doing them as a government project became not the most efficient way of doing things as Silicon Valley and the tech industry paved the way towards cell phones and computers and building technologies that were more advanced and doing things in a much more rapid and iterative way than a single project of designing one space mission for 15 years or so and then finally getting in space. Along came companies like SpaceX doing rockets differently and then Planet Labs doing satellites and building them more like disposable cell phones and cameras rather than billion-dollar one-off missions. That movement has been called New Space, and it's also been referred to as Agile Aerospace, and doing aerospace in an agile, quicker, iterative way and doing it many orders of magnitude cheaper, but then also higher risk, but then you get to learn iteratively, and over time that becomes lower risk because you get to learn and apply, and rather than just study and model and then do it right the first time. Planet and SpaceX somewhat paved the way for this new space industry, and now there's many companies that are doing space in a more iterative, agile way, and now rocket launches is much more affordable to get things into orbit, and the cost to get a kilogram of something into space has come down by orders of magnitude, and it's made it accessible for entrepreneurs to create a space company in their garage, whereas more of only a large government contractor could do a space mission before. Now there's a lot of companies that are building satellites to do cool things and solve all sorts of unique problems and challenges for Earth and provide new services from space. And then now there's new missions doing private space stations in space and building the infrastructure needed to have humans on the moon and eventually cities on the moon. And this all is happening faster and faster. And as these next generations of rockets open up the transportation architecture, then there are hundreds, if not thousands, of entrepreneurs that are building the companies needed to live in space and to build flourishing civilizations in space. And so that all is happening quicker. And then along with this, for a long time, venture capital and the funding was not available for space companies. And then SpaceX and Planet were two of the ones that really first attracted venture funding. And with venture capital funding, generally these have to be a vision that can pay back and return the money within 7 years or so. For a long time, space was too long of a bet, and people would think, oh, that's a 20 or 50-year bet, and that would not make sense for traditional funding models. But then now, with what SpaceX has done and Planet has done and others, is now it becomes bettable for venture capital funding, and now there's all sorts of funds that are betting on space, and now all sorts of traditional other funds that didn't do space are now interested in space. And so there's been, a big influx of capital into supporting the space industry and seeing that grow. And now these companies can do things in space and become a profitable space company much quicker than they could before. I've been an angel investor in a bunch of space companies as well. I feel it's a very exciting time for space, and that many people will be living and working in space, and that we will see cities in space, and we will fly on rockets to go point to point around Earth, and millions of people will be in space in the coming decades. It's an exciting time where we've been blown away by what's happened with AI over the last couple of years, and it's gone from an interesting science research thing to something that affects all of our life. And I feel space is coming soon, as far as it's on this inflection point of all of a sudden it's going to open up and become a reality for many people that this is actually happening, and it's happening quicker than people currently think.
As you mentioned, the cost to launch things is going down, but I assume it's still very expensive. So how have you made it work in past? How does the type of launch and the type of partnership differ for sending something to the International Space Station versus sending something to the moon versus dropping off a satellite? And then second question would be, are you able to fund that purely from the customers? How do you make it work on an economic level?
There's a lot of cargo that goes to the space station, and so that can be one of the most affordable places to send something to space. Putting something in orbit, we haven't put ours directly as the sole thing in orbit because we're small and don't want to add to floating objects out there, but we've put things on other objects that are in orbit, and then we're just a piece of that. If you go to moon's orbit, that is a certain level. If you go to land on the moon, landing on the moon is harder. And then actually in October this year, we are on a moon rover. And so the moon rover is on the lander lands on the moon rover, drives off, and we have this pyramid on the front of this moon lander, and we'll get live video of it driving around on the moon. Perhaps not live, but a little delayed, but we'll get video of it on the moon. And so these sort of missions would have been very hard 5 years ago, and they're still hard, but they're becoming more accessible, and some of them are Yeah, oftentimes you pay by the gram what putting stuff on, but then there's also can be a cost to just getting something on the mission. The last couple of missions, we've been able to cover the cost of them, and some of that's been from individuals adding either art or stories or DNA or other things, and some of that has been entrepreneurs that add their own gallery of art or their own archive of something or their own content that they're adding, and some of that has been brands. On this next mission to the moon, we're sending the first chocolate bar to the moon, and then a brand is launching a special chocolate bar based on that. And so yeah, we have ways for all different people, communities, organizations, entrepreneurs, and then brands to participate in these space missions, and that has helped cover them. And then I want to do bigger and bigger missions, and so I'm working on a next mission for 2027 that we have a really cool partner that we're collaborating with on it, and then we're working to bring on some other cool partners to save a collective bigger monument of Earth and an archive of humanity and human knowledge and get some really cool collections on board. So working on bigger missions, and then really dream of putting something bigger up on the moon that requires humans to go up there, and that people can be part of building this collective larger monument or even like temple-sized thing on the moon that is really a grand project and mission from humanity that can live on.
Yeah. As you're speaking, so I know you are very inspired by both your time in San Francisco as well as Burning Man. Could you speak a bit about how those two things have influenced the work that you do?
Yeah. With San Francisco first, I was part of a fast-growing tech company and really, really feel like San Francisco has had an impact on who I am as an entrepreneur and my vision. And there's a feeling in San Francisco of creating something big that can positively impact the world and impact humanity, and that we can build big things that help our planet, and we can do things rapidly. And I was part of one of those companies that had a big impact on how we see the Earth and how we understand the Earth. And so, yeah, that gave me a big vision dream of, okay, we can do this as humans, and we can create the solutions, and we can do it quickly, and we can impact our species. And then Burning Man, this year will be my 10th Burning Man, and we go out to this big expansive desert in Nevada called the Playa. It's Black Rock Desert, and we build a city from the dust there every year. The city has about 70,000 people and all sorts of big art and structures and the places we live and our kitchens and places for music, like all these get built. And it really is this blank slate that we create everything needed for humans to thrive in the desert in this harsh environment. And that definitely has given me a feeling like, okay, if we can create this from scratch, what if we create a city on the moon? In the middle of Burning Man is the temple, and a temple gets built there each year, and each year a different artist does the design of it, and a whole crew of people come together to both fundraise for that temple and then pre-construct it beforehand, and then show up in the desert and build a giant temple at Burning Man. Each year that has been a powerful place for me. All sorts of people write memories or wishes or prayers on the walls of this temple, and 24 hours a day there's people in it, either sitting there in silence or meditating or singing or getting married at the temple. And yeah, there's been many nights where I've been out there at 4 a.m. and riding by the temple and been drawn in and had a powerful experience there, or ended up at sunrise at the temple or sunset. And it's a powerful place where there's everything at Burning Man, and there's big music and big energy, but there's something sacred and powerful that the temple creates each year. And so as we look towards cities on the moon and how humans move outwards, I dream of, what if we build a temple up there first? What if the focus isn't just mining and military bases and other things, but what if we create a sacred space and a sanctuary on the moon and a destination that people want to go, and we make it participatory, and we send a mission up on a ship of 50 people where they go for a week and they have a powerful experience like at Burning Man, an experience co-created and designed to be transformational and make you look back at Earth and feel a powerful awakening about life in the universe and the sacredness of Earth. And what if you go visit a playa on the moon and you help participate and help set up part of that temple or set up part of an art garden around it? And yeah, so that's what I dream of with this movement, is starting with monuments on the moon, but building towards missions to the moon where people go for a powerful experience and help build a sacred space on the moon. And then taking that a step further, if we've done that a bunch of times and the technologies are there, then what about building a permanent habitat on the moon, or almost like an event space or a retreat center or a biosphere that has plants and life in it and is a step towards both stewarding life, but then also humans going up there with a purposeful, meaningful way that is meant to be a powerful experience, or how we go out there. And so that's what I dream of, is what if we create a community-driven path towards people pursuing space and experiencing space in a beautiful way that then goes on to impacting how we live back here on Earth.
How do you see the difference between ephemerality, or something that's temporary, and permanence? One of the things about Burning Man is that it gets constructed but also gets taken down every year, and so if sometimes it feels like maybe it never happened because you don't have any physical remnants of it. And from what you were talking about just now, going to the moon, sending people to the moon for a week at a time but then bringing them back again, versus building monuments there which will stay for a very long time, are quite different things. So do you think of that as a tension, or how are they fundamentally different?
Part of the magic of Burning Man is like it's left with just the dust and gets perfectly cleaned up and restored. And with the moon and this vision, I feel we're building towards leaving a lasting temple up there, or monument, or something that lives on beyond. And so it is a different approach, and it is something different. And every bit you take to the moon is hard to get there. Anything you bring back from the moon is even harder, because then you need the fuel to lift it back off. And yeah, collectively as a species, we are building towards the city on the moon and towards a permanent presence up there. Let's build something lasting for humanity and something on the moon. And I care about the moon, and I don't want to see it turn into a wasteland. And so I want it to be done beautifully, and I feel like there will be places that are protected and a sanctuary, and I kind of have this sense and feeling, who knows, but that the moon wants something there. The moon's been lonely up there, and if we do it in a beautiful way and create a temple and an art garden on it, that's a cool thing to have up there. I think done in the right way and done beautifully, it can be a great thing to leave behind on this barren moon surface.
Now it's a really interesting time because there are so many things to be optimistic about, but at the same time there's also a lot of things that people feel really despondent about, and people generally just have a lot of different values, and it's quite hard to align those values. So when you're thinking about building something permanent that does reflect humanity and civilization, what are the values that you want to ingrain in these monuments on the moon?
Mm-hmm. I care about a positive future for humanity, and something that collectively people can believe in and be inspired by. I'm inspired by a future where humans are out there among the stars and are carrying life outwards and are doing it in stewardship of life, and that we're also stewarding life here on Earth, and we care about humans and culture, and it's not just robots and AI out there doing it. I want these artifacts we leave behind and this eventual temple to be something that is about humanity and carries our soul and our heart in it, and is about life, and is about all the different peoples of our Earth, and that people all over the world can collectively feel a piece of them in that and have their story a part of it, or have their creation and their art and their ideas a part of it. I care about it being accessible and something that people can be part of and something people can be inspired by about our species. I care about it being done in a community way where if we do someday have a place people can visit up there, that it is something that people around the world can feel they have the potential and dream of going there, and hopefully that they can someday. I want it to be a movement and a community that people see as a path for them to both work on something beyond themselves and work on something bigger for our collective human journey, as well as like a path towards them being part of space and each person being part of a movement that could one day either carry their DNA to the stars and then be a part of that, a copy of themselves, or their consciousness could be carried on to a new world, or they could physically be on the moon someday in one of these gatherings. It's about participation and carrying us outwards.
You mentioned abundance a couple of times. How do you view abundance, and do you think it's a prerequisite or an outcome of the work that you're doing with LifeShip?
I feel we have an abundance of resources and energy in space. We have a coming abundance of intelligence and robot work, and that there is the potential for us to care for all of humanity and for us to all have our needs met and for us all to live with all that we need to be happy and to pursue our dreams. And yes, there's challenges to get there and it's unevenly distributed, but there's great potential there. I feel one of the things humans need the most is like a positive vision and narrative of where we're headed as a species. And I think a North Star of humans out there among the stars and humans caring for life here on Earth and us being stewards of life and us figuring out how to flourish other places and how to flourish here and care for each other. That's a beautiful future, and that's a future I'm inspired by. I think we are the species to do it. And the more that we can help connect the dots towards that future, then the more that I hope it inspires and impacts us to live that way here and now and build towards that together. And so I hope that what I'm working on in some ways inspires people to see the possibility of humans as a beautiful species that does this in the universe, or as one of the species that goes on to being a beautiful species beyond, and that we do it here today.
Thank you so much. So we are coming to the end of our time for this interview, but it's been such a great conversation. You've answered most of this question, but I'm wondering if anything else comes up for you. This is something that I always end my conversations with, which is what makes you optimistic about the future?
Humans are, there's quite a story that we've lived so far. It's quite a unimaginable, beautiful existence that we have here on Earth, and we've had a miraculous life that has evolved here, and the just like beauty of our planet, that I feel that we're living such a beautiful story and that all the dots connect to getting us to where we are. And I believe that we're on a trajectory towards a beautiful future as well. And now is such a beautiful time to be alive. And yes, we have our big challenges, and yes, we have big unknowns for the future. But if we look at where we've been and where we're headed, I feel like we have great potential in that. And then I meet many people working on big, beautiful solutions that can help us. And I feel that we have a path through all this, and that we can follow our dreams and create big things in ways that even 5 or 10 years ago where you could not have done by yourself. And so we live at such a time for everyone to take action and create things and to be the creators of this new world and new worlds beyond that we want to see.
Thank you for joining us on the journey of Moonshot Radio, where we ask what it means to be human in the age of accelerating technology. I'm your host, Linda Du. We weighed the implications of playing God by printing biological life. We reimagined cities in a world of flying vehicles. We explored the edges of desire through virtual experiences. We pieced together our fractured sense of self in a digital world amid hyper-surveillance, even down to our genetic identity. Technology can be a powerful means of control, but also an enabler of human empathy and artistic creativity, as we form deep and meaningful connections across the world and unlock powerful tools of personal expression. Technologies might tempt us with quick fixes to existential threats. We discussed how geoengineering may mitigate the worst effects of climate change, but could trigger unforeseen climatic consequences. In the face of extinction and mortality, we look ever more towards preservation, cryogenically freezing the human body with hopes of resurrection, backing up the vast trove of human knowledge in our planet's orbit, and even creating a backup of Earth's species in a DNA archive on the moon. Thank you for taking this time to reflect on the future we're building and the values we're carrying forward as we reshape humanity along the way.